I'm Bob Harris, president of the Decorative Concrete Institute. When it comes time to get to the more exciting phases of the project, which is typically adding color, whether it's an acid stain, water-based stain, or a dye for that matter, the type of sprayer that you use is really important. Now, the size of the project in which you'll be applying your coloring agent is going to determine the type of sprayer that you use. As you can see, we have a variety of different sizes, 2 gallon, 1 gallon, and even quart-size sprayers for small detailed areas, so you really need to pick the appropriate sprayer. Now, a couple of observations on these sprayers. You'll notice that on the side of this sprayer it says acid, and so what that means, it's going to resist any acid, whether it's hydrochloric or muriatic acid, because of the seals that are used in this type of a sprayer. Whereas on this type of sprayer, you'll notice over here it says acetone and alcohol. So you really need to read the manufacturer's precautions and the types of materials that the sprayers are capable of spraying, okay, because each has a specific use. Also, you'll notice the tips in this case. We have a red tip and a gray tip. And what that represents is the amount of volume or fluid that's coming out of the tip. The red tip is much less volume for spraying fine mists like an acid stain. And the gray tip is going to spray more volume like a water-based stain or even a sealer. Also, we like to use a tip that's conical in fashion. And what I mean by conical is the fact that it comes out in a cone as opposed to a fan. If you have a fan spray pattern, inevitably you'll see the outer lines of that fan. So it's real important to use a conical spray pattern. A real important safety consideration when using any of these sprayers is that when you assemble your sprayers, make absolutely certain that you attach all of the components that thread on to the spray vessel. Make sure they're tight. I've heard horror stories of disasters happening in the industry. One case was somebody had put an acid stain into the sprayer and pumped the sprayer up to fully atomize the stain, and the attachments, the threaded attachments, were not thoroughly attached to the unit, and it popped off and sprayed acid stain in their face. So please be careful. Use the appropriate sprayer for that given task. Like always, proper safety equipment is mandatory. Safety glasses, respirators. Now, when you're spraying heavy solvents, in this case an acetone or an alcohol, I highly recommend that you use an OSHA-approved respirator that's specifically designed for capturing the airborne solvents that come in as a vapor. So also, non-absorbent gloves. You don't want acid stains or solvents dripping on your skin. So let's show you how these sprayers work. On our pump-up sprayer, we're going to be spraying a solvent-based dye. A couple of observations. I have a solvent-resistant cartridge that's specifically for the gases that emit up. Also, non-absorbent gloves. I have my proper eye protection as well. When it comes time to use this, what you want to do is, you can see I have the tip into a bucket, and I'm always going to check the spray stream in a bucket. What could happen, let's say for example the tip of the sprayer was clogged and I go to squeeze the trigger, it could spew the dye out onto the floor. So it's a good idea to make sure it's spraying in the proper fashion. We've already checked to make sure everything is tight. We don't want a disaster to occur. And I've pumped this up. I've really pressurized the sprayer to put it out in a nice mist stream. Now here's a common mistake I see people make, whether it's a stain or a dye. Inevitably, they'll squeeze the trigger. For whatever reason, they'll let off on the trigger, and of course you're going to get unwanted drips and splatters. So the moment you squeeze the trigger, you'll end up back into the bucket. Never let off like this out in the middle of a slab. I'll show you how it works. Despite this sprayer being solvent resistant, a couple of very important tips to help preserve your sprayer. Number one, anytime that you put something into the sprayer, you should always strain whatever the material is. It's just good routine. That way you won't have any particulate that will clog the tip that could otherwise spell disaster when you're out putting your dye down. Also, once you've strained it, it's just a great idea to take a clean rag and wipe the rim so solvents don't come in direct contact with the seals right here. That little tip is really going to help preserve the sprayer. One last thing, when you've completed your dye job, get the remaining solvents or the dyes out of the sprayer, Usually I'll run a little bit of solvent, whether it's some clean acetone or xylane, and then immediately flush it with water. And you'll have a sprayer that'll last fairly long, as opposed to leaving everything with the acetone in the hose. Remember, to get the most out of your tools, use them properly, and more importantly, use them safely. I'm Bob Harris.